What would you have done in this situation? Could you have stood as strong as the royal guard, or would you have stepped in as a bystander? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Your thoughts make this community stronger. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another powerful moment. We post new stories every day, and trust us, you won't want to miss tomorrow's shocking episode. Turn on notifications now, and we'll see you again same time, same place, tomorrow. His disrespect crossed the line, and the guard's reaction was epic. The crisp autumn air settled over Buckingham Palace, the golden morning sunlight reflecting off the grand iron gates. Tourists gathered, their voices filled with excitement as they adjusted cameras and took in the sight of the King's Guard, standing motionless in their iconic red tunics and tall bearskin hats. The atmosphere was one of quiet admiration, until Ryan Callahan entered the scene. At 6 feet tall, with an unkempt beard and a stained hoodie, Ryan shoved past other visitors with the entitlement of a man who thought the world revolved around him. His backpack sagged off one shoulder, smudged with dirt and food stains, a reflection of someone who didn't particularly care how he presented himself. His presence was disruptive from the moment he arrived. "Move it, will ya?" he grumbled, elbowing through a group of tourists who had been patiently lining up for photos. A woman gasped as he nearly knocked over her child, while an elderly couple exchanged disapproving glances. Ryan barely noticed. A few steps away, standing perfectly still, was Sergeant Daniel Carter, a seasoned Royal Guard in his early 30s, with 8 years of military service behind him. His posture was impeccable, his rifle positioned flawlessly, and his gaze locked forward, unfazed by the world around him. His discipline was absolute. But Ryan saw something else. To him, the guard was just another tourist attraction, a novelty to poke fun at. He smirked as he pulled a crumpled fast food wrapper from his hoodie pocket and tossed it onto the pavement near the guard's polished boots. "Oops," he muttered sarcastically, watching for any reaction. There was none. Tourists murmured in discomfort as Ryan pulled out a half-eaten breakfast sandwich and took a massive bite. "Must be boring, huh?" He spoke with his mouth full, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "Standing there all day, acting all important?" He chuckled, wiping his greasy fingers on his jeans before waving the sandwich dangerously close to the guard's face. A retired Marine, Colonel James Whitmore, standing among the crowd, narrowed his eyes. He had seen this kind of arrogance before, the kind that thought discipline was a weakness. His jaw tightened as Ryan leaned even closer to Sergeant Carter, his disrespect growing with every second. The crowd was beginning to sense it now, something was about to happen. Ryan Callahan grinned as he waved his half-eaten sandwich inches from Sergeant Carter's face, daring the soldier to react. The guard remained still, his expression unchanging, but the tension in the air was undeniable. The crowd watched with growing unease, murmuring among themselves, exchanging glances that ranged from discomfort to disgust. "Come on, man," Ryan scoffed, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You really just gonna stand there?" No reaction. "Nothing?" He let out a mocking laugh, shaking his head. "Must suck, huh? Standing here like a statue while the whole world moves on." Sergeant Carter didn't flinch. He had been trained for moments like this. He had served in combat, faced real danger, and had spent years perfecting his discipline. No amount of taunting from a belligerent tourist could shake him. But Ryan wasn't done. He wanted to break him. He pulled out a bottle of soda, took a long, exaggerated sip, and burped loudly, not bothering to cover his mouth. "Ah," he sighed, leaning in even closer. "Bet you wish you could take a break, huh? Maybe have a drink, stretch your legs a little." The crowd had started to shift. Parents pulled their kids away. Elderly tourists shook their heads. But no one stepped in. They knew the rules. The guards weren't supposed to react. But that didn't mean this was okay. One man, however, had seen enough. Colonel James Whitmore, a 65-year-old retired U.S. Marine, had been standing quietly among the tourists, his sharp blue eyes locked onto Ryan's every move. He recognized disrespect when he saw it. He had spent his life teaching young soldiers the meaning of honor and discipline, and what he was witnessing now made his blood boil. He took a slow step forward, standing just behind Ryan. His voice was low but commanding. "You got a real problem, son?" Ryan whipped around, startled. He hadn't expected anyone to confront him. The sight of the older man with a straight-backed posture, military haircut, and eyes that had clearly seen war made him hesitate, but only for a second. "Who the hell are you?" Ryan scoffed, trying to sound tough. "Someone who actually understands respect," Whitmore replied. The crowd had gone completely silent. The mood had shifted. For the first time, Ryan felt something creeping in. Doubt. Ryan Callahan sized up the older man standing before him. Colonel James Whitmore's posture was firm, his stare unshaken, the kind of look that came from years of service, from witnessing real discipline, real sacrifice. For the first time since Ryan had started his little game, he felt something shift. The power dynamic had changed. The crowd, once amused or silently uncomfortable, was now locked onto the confrontation. Parents whispered to their children, telling them to pay attention. Tourists pulled out their phones, not just to record the guard, but to capture what was unfolding before them. Ryan tried to laugh it off, shaking his head. "Oh, great. We got a hero here," he muttered. He turned back towards Sergeant Carter, still standing perfectly still, completely unfazed. "Seriously? You just gonna let some old dude fight your battles?" Whitmore's expression didn't change. He took a single step closer. Controlled. Calculated. "You think this is a joke?" His voice was steady, filled with the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Ryan scoffed, shifting his weight. "I think it's pathetic," he shot back. "What kind of grown man just stands there, letting people mess with him? You call that strength?" Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Strength isn't proving how loud you can be," he said. "It's standing firm when it matters. It's knowing when to act, and when not to." Ryan rolled his eyes, but the weight of the moment was starting to settle in. The crowd was watching. More importantly, he was no longer in control. Then, he made his mistake. He took a slow step forward and leaned in towards Sergeant Carter's face. Close enough that his breath, reeking of fast food and arrogance, was inches from the guard's expressionless features. He smirked. And then, he sneezed. Deliberately. Not covering his mouth. Not turning away. A wet, forceful blast of air and saliva, directly onto the royal guard's face. The crowd gasped. Someone audibly swore. A mother covered her child's eyes, shaking her head in horror. Ryan grinned like it was the funniest thing in the world. But as he wiped his nose on his sleeve, he felt something shift behind him. Colonel Whitmore had moved. And this time, so had the guard. The moment Ryan Callahan sneezed directly into Sergeant Carter's face, the entire crowd froze. The silence was deafening, the weight of the act settling over everyone like a thick fog. Mothers shielded their children's eyes. Elderly tourists exchanged shocked glances. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Ryan, however, grinned like a child who had just pulled off the ultimate prank. He wiped his nose on his sleeve, still oblivious to the severity of what he had just done. But then, something changed. Sergeant Carter moved. It wasn't much, just a small shift, a recalibration of stance, but for a king's guard, it was monumental. His rifle adjusted ever so slightly against his shoulder, his chest rising as he took a slow, deliberate breath. For the first time that morning, he looked directly at Ryan. The laughter died in Ryan's throat. The arrogance that had fueled his entire act flickered like a dying match. Behind him, Colonel Whitmore smirked, crossing his arms. "Well," he muttered under his breath. "Now you've done it." A pair of security officers had already begun moving through the crowd, their navy uniforms cutting through the sea of stunned spectators. But before they reached him, the captain of the guard himself stepped forward. A tall, broad-shouldered man with a presence that commanded instant respect, Captain Michael Harrington carried himself with the air of someone who had seen war, led men, and tolerated exactly zero nonsense. His boots landed with authority on the pavement as he closed the distance between himself and Ryan. Ryan, for the first time, took an instinctive step backward. "Sir," Captain Harrington's voice was measured, controlled, but filled with unmistakable power. "You have just assaulted a member of His Majesty's Armed Forces." Ryan blinked. "What? Assault?" He let out a forced laugh. "It was just a sneeze, man. Chill out." The captain's jaw clenched. "You intentionally expelled bodily fluids onto a royal guard while knowing you were sick." He nodded toward the security officers, who had now arrived at Ryan's side. "That is a chargeable offense." The crowd murmured, phones raised, capturing every second. Ryan's face paled as realization dawned. This wasn't a game anymore. And now, there was no way out. Ryan froze as the reality of the situation sank in. The weight of Captain Harrington's words pressed down on him like a lead blanket. Assault. A chargeable offense. The laughter, the arrogance, the smug sense of control, all of it vanished. The two security officers now stood on either side of him, their presence alone enough to make his pulse spike. The cameras were still rolling, dozens of phones capturing every detail, ensuring that this moment would live on far beyond today. Ryan swallowed hard. "Come on, guys," he said, forcing a weak chuckle. "You can't be serious. It was just a joke." Captain Harrington's expression didn't waver. "A joke?" His voice was dangerously calm. "You deliberately ignored protocol, disrespected a royal guard, and exposed him to a potential health risk." Ryan's eyes darted toward Sergeant Carter. The guard stood as still as ever, but there was something different now, something in his presence that made Ryan's skin crawl. For the first time, Ryan understood discipline. He had mocked it, belittled it, tested it. And now, he was facing the consequences of underestimating it. The captain turned to the security officers. "Escort him out." Ryan's stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" His voice rose slightly, a nervous edge creeping in. "You're kicking me out?" One of the officers placed a firm hand on his arm. "Sir, you need to come with us." Panic flared in Ryan's chest. This wasn't just some harmless prank anymore, this was spiraling into something much worse. He glanced around desperately, looking for someone, anyone, who might step in on his behalf. But the crowd had already judged him. The same people who had laughed moments ago now looked at him with disgust. Parents whispered to their children about respect. Tourists shook their heads, muttering about consequences. No one was on his side. The officers began leading him toward the gates. His feet dragged against the pavement, his mind racing for a way out. That's when Colonel Whitmore spoke, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Son, you just learned a hard lesson." He shook his head. "Respect isn't optional. And now? The world's gonna remember you as the guy who sneezed his way into infamy." Ryan's chest tightened. Because he knew, deep down, Whitmore was right. "We want to hear from you. What would you have done in this situation? Do you think Ryan deserved the consequences of his actions, or do you believe it was blown out of proportion? Have you ever witnessed someone push a situation too far and face unexpected consequences? Respect is a value that many take for granted, until it's tested. The Royal Guards are known for their unwavering discipline, but what happens when that discipline is challenged in ways no one expects? This story wasn't just about a prank gone wrong, it was about a deeper lesson in respect, consequences, and self-awareness. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Have you ever seen the King's Guard in person? What was your experience like? And if you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories like this one. We upload daily, so turn on notifications and don't miss tomorrow's powerful story. Your thoughts, experiences, and opinions matter, and we love engaging with our community. So let's start a conversation. What's your take on this unforgettable moment?